Welcome to today's lecture on the fascinating origins of the Greek alphabet. Our discussion today is heavily influenced by the groundbreaking research of Dr. Willemijn Waal, a distinguished lecturer in Assyrian and Hittite studies at the University of Leiden and the esteemed director of the Netherlands Institute for the Near East. Dr. Waal presents a compelling argument that the Greek alphabet stands as the very first true alphabet, a revolutionary writing system that emerged remarkably early, around the 11th century BCE, even predating the standardized scripts we often associate with this period, such as the Phoenician. To understand this bold claim, we will delve into four key pillars of evidence: the historical context of its emergence, the insights gleaned from early epigraphic clues, the distinctive scribal habits of the early Greeks, and finally, a crucial re-evaluation of the so-called argument from silence. Historical context: a pioneering alphabet. Let's begin by setting the historical stage. The Late Bronze Age, spanning roughly from 1600 to 1200 BCE, was a period dominated by complex and often cumbersome writing systems across the eastern Mediterranean. We see the impressive cuneiform in Mesopotamia, the intricate hieroglyphs in Egypt, and the Aegean's linear A and B. These scripts, while effective for their time, were primarily designed for administrative records and bureaucratic purposes. They typically employed hundreds of signs, a complexity that inherently limited literacy to a select elite: scribes, priests, and administrators. However, as we transition into the early Iron Age, around the 11th century BCE, something truly revolutionary began to take shape in the Greek-speaking world. The Greeks developed a writing system that fundamentally transformed the very nature of literacy: a true alphabet. What made it revolutionary? The audacious innovation of introducing vowel signs. This was a game-changer, creating the first fully phonetic writing system where every sound, both consonant and vowel, had its own distinct symbol. Unlike the logographic or syllabic predecessors, which were largely tied to bureaucratic functions, the Greek alphabet's inherent simplicity opened the doors to diverse applications, from mundane personal inscriptions to the soaring heights of epic poetry. Dr. Waal's assertion is that this profound innovation did not follow but rather preceded the standardization of other well-known scripts, like the Phoenician, firmly establishing the Greek alphabet as a pioneering system of its kind. Epigraphic evidence: early and diverse inscriptions. Moving on to the tangible evidence, by the 8th century BCE, we witness a remarkable proliferation of Greek inscriptions. These aren't isolated occurrences, they appear across a vast geographical expanse, from mainland Greece and the Aegean Islands to distant outposts in Italy and the west coast of Anatolia. What's even more striking is the sheer diversity within these early records, exhibiting no less than 33 distinct alphabetic varieties. Yet, despite this regional variation, they share a unifying characteristic: the consistent use of vowel signs. This widespread presence and inherent diversity are, according to Dr. Waal, strong indicators of a long period of prior development. Consider the famous Nestor's Cup inscription, dated to approximately 750 BCE. This artifact doesn't bear a simple administrative note, it features a poetic dedication, a clear demonstration of the alphabet's versatility extending far beyond mere record-keeping. Dr. Waal argues that such sophistication points to an origin as early as the 11th century BCE, providing ample centuries for the Greeks to meticulously refine their alphabet, integrate vowels, and adapt it to the nuances of their local dialects. The widespread and varied nature of these inscriptions strongly suggests that the Greek alphabet was already well established as the first fully phonetic system long before other contemporary scripts achieved a similar level of standardization and widespread adoption. Scribal habits: distinctive Greek innovations. The unique scribal habits observed in early Greek inscriptions offer yet another compelling layer of evidence for the alphabet's independent and early development. Early Greek texts from the 8th century BCE display an astonishing lack of a fixed writing direction. We find them appearing left to right to left, vertically, or even horizontally, a flexibility that Dr. Waal vividly describes as all over the place. This contrasts sharply with other prominent scripts of the era, such as the Phoenician, which had already standardized to a consistent right-to-left direction by the 11th century BCE. The Greeks' apparent experimentation with writing direction suggests that they developed their alphabet independently, rather than simply adopting and adapting an already standardized system. It was a period of active innovation. By the 5th century BCE, the Greek alphabet eventually settled into a left-to-right standard, a unique choice that further distinguished it from its Semitic contemporaries. Furthermore, early Greek inscriptions, including the aforementioned Nestor's cup, often utilized dots or vertical strokes to separate words. This practice is notably absent in the Phoenicians' continuous writing style, which typically ran words together without explicit dividers. These distinctive scribal habits, the variable writing direction and the implementation of word dividers, strongly indicate that the Greeks were actively innovating with their alphabet as early as the 11th century BCE. They were not merely borrowing, they were creating the first writing system truly tailored to their unique linguistic and cultural needs, a point powerfully emphasized by Dr. Willemijn Waal. Addressing the argument from silence. Finally, let's address a common counter-argument, the argument from silence. Critics often point to the apparent lack of Greek inscriptions before the 8th century BCE as a challenge to an earlier origin. However, Dr. Waal skillfully counters that this absence is far from conclusive evidence against an early emergence. It's crucial to consider the materials on which early Greek texts were likely written. Unlike the durable clay tablets used for cuneiform, early Greek writing would have predominantly been on perishable materials such as papyrus, wood, or leather. These materials rarely survive the ravages of time, especially in the archaeological record. Moreover, the survival of other scripts, such as Anatolian hieroglyphs, even after the collapse of the mighty Hittite Empire, demonstrates that writing systems can persist and thrive in non-administrative contexts, even through periods often termed Dark Ages. The Greek alphabet likely experienced a similar trajectory during the early Iron Age, 1200 to 800 BCE, a period often characterized by a decline in monumental architecture and large-scale administrative systems. The rapid and widespread appearance of 33 distinct alphabetic varieties by the 8th century BCE strongly implies centuries of prior use and development. An 11th century BCE origin, as Dr. Waal proposes, provides precisely the necessary timeframe for the Greeks to develop the crucial innovation of vowels and for these regional variants to emerge and spread, thereby establishing their alphabet as the first true phonetic system before other scripts achieved widespread standardization. The argument from silence, therefore, reflects preservation challenges and archaeological biases, rather than a definitive lack of early alphabetic activity. Conclusion. In summary, Dr. Willemijn Waal, lecturer in Assyrian and Hittite studies at the University of Leiden and director of the Netherlands Institute for the Near East, presents a compelling and well-supported case for the Greek alphabet as the first true alphabet, emerging around the 11th century BCE. Its revolutionary inclusion of vowel signs, the rich diversity of its early inscriptions, and its innovative scribal habits, such as variable writing directions and the use of word dividers, all underscore its pioneering role. The perceived absence of earlier inscriptions, often cited as the argument from silence, is convincingly explained by the use of perishable writing materials, rather than a genuine lack of early alphabetic activity. This perspective transforms our understanding of the early Iron Age, casting it not as a period of cultural stagnation, but as a vibrant crucible of Greek innovation that gave birth to a truly transformative writing system, long before others achieved similar levels of phonetic precision and widespread use. Thank you for your attention. I welcome any questions you may have.
But I think one does not exclude the other. They could still be connections with Phoenicians, even though they had already received their alphabet via different modes. So I'm not at all arguing that there were no connections with Phoenicians. Quite the contrary, actually. But for me, it could also maybe have happened at an earlier stage, of course. But
yeah,
that's why then I'm sure it would have been very suitable for purposes of trade, for example. So you can imagine, indeed, that it was sort of a coin. And in that respect, yes, you're right. The model, I try to, in my still too static model, I admit, already to show that it may not have been such a linear development. But you're quite right. If the script, for example, developed and spread via trade routes, etc. Then we could have a whole different ball game. But I certainly agree. And then in that respect, there may not necessarily have to be one location. Especially in the case of Anatolia, we know that there were wooden scribes who wrote on wood, and also in the case of the alphabet, we know that it was written down on perishable materials. So actually, there is quite a lot of evidence that there must have been so much more, and there are so many chance found in other locations. For example, in Novgorod, that by chance we have these birth documents, and which change our whole perspective on the medieval ages there. So I think we should really be aware of the fact, I mean, how wonderful it is that we have so much, but that's actually, that there's so much that we do not have. Interesting, for some people also ask me, okay, but so why didn't they write on pottery before, for example? And but if you look at the ancient Near East, where we have this very long cuneiform tradition, then if you look at the amount of inscribed pottery, that's really limited. And also, for example, the Hittite Empire only starts writing inscriptions quite late. So in a way, that has to do with certain changes of tradition. So it's. Yeah. But you're right in a way that you can speculate, but especially in the case that we know that the primary material for writing alphabetic writing system is basically always perishable. I think in this case it would be fair to assume, but it's a bit distorted because of the cuneiform tradition. There we have the clay, but it's actually worldwide quite an exceptional use primary writing material. I mean, usually it's like wood or leaves and that kind of material.
The narrative themes that are very Homeric being displayed in Thera, in Santorini, in Akrotiri, in the fresco program. Yeah. So what is your view on that? Because she seems to make a very strong connection, or suggest a very strong connection between the possibility of the Homeric epic being as early as that, and we're talking about late minor and 1A. So
that's really quite. For me actually, I think as you all know, there's quite some debate about it. But there's some. I mean, I think everyone has to agree that there are quite a lot of archaic elements, both in the language of Homer and also in the boar-tusk helmet and the shields, etc. That there really are archaic elements in there. And an important book is, of course, a catalogue of ships, which, according to most scholars, does represent more the Mycenaean world than the Iron Age, which are all. And especially, I mean, this catalogue of ships, which is, well, I think not the most exciting book of Homer, but it's quite long, and at least I think 178 ships, and it's quite extensive. It's not a very typically oral product to transmit. I mean, it's really, I mean, especially people like Jack Goody, for example, think that the whole concept of catalogue is quite a written thing, actually, that it's not very common in purely oral societies. So, and especially such a catalogue of ships, I could imagine that it actually really was written down much. And I think there are indications that it's like a later insertion that is maybe not part of the original epic, but it may come, really reflect an older tradition, and that that such lists and such catalogues did circulate.
And they were written down. It wasn't just
they were written, And
the question is who used them. That is the big question. Who used them? Who was? What was the agency behind?
But people tend to like catalogues. It's interesting, but you see it in the ancient Near East that some of the oldest texts are these lexical lists, etc. Apparently, people like putting things in lists and to bring order in the world. But it's I think that's also Foucault who addresses that quite extensively. But I think it's quite interesting that if you look at the Greek history, their own perception of history, they don't see a dark age, they don't see a gap. They see the heroic age really as part of their history, and there's no. I mean, our view is so, in a way, distorted by this idea that we have this dark age, and now we know it was not as dark, and that there may have been much more continuity, actually. And I think the fact that the Greeks themselves, the way they talk about their past, I mean, it feels like there's for them no interruption, but actually continuity. Mm-hmm. And we know from texts, I mean, there were discoveries of ancient texts. I mean, we know that you have these texts that mention like the discoveries of old bronze tablets with mysterious signs, etc. And well, I'm pretty sure they must have encountered their written past. If you think when Arthur Evans arrived at Crete in the early 1920s or so, I mean he saw Cretan women wearing these hieroglyphic seals, etc. as jewelry, right? So I mean, if people in the previous century still discovered like written evidence of the Greek past, I'm sure the ancient Greeks themselves must have as well. So for me, it's not so. For me, I mean, actually, I don't see the Homer and the whole heroic age as illiterate necessarily. And if you look at tragedies that are placed in the heroic age, from Sophocles, for example. I mean, and they're all. I mean, there you do see frequent references to writing, usually the writing of letters, etc. So I think for the Greeks also their heroic age was not necessarily illiterate. And I think, but it's an interesting point you're raising, because I think one of the main reasons why we are so fixed with the idea that it must have been the Phoenicians who introduced the alphabet to Greece is Herodotus, who talks about the Phoenicia grammata, which he explains as being Phoenician letters, which you could also explain, for example, as palm leaf writing, etc. And I mean, it's obvious that there's a Semitic background of the Greek alphabet, but if it were necessary the Phoenicians, I mean, it's basically Herodotus, well, and the fact that we have Phoenician presence, but I mean, it's not actually so certain as we sometimes think it is, that it must have been the Phoenicians who were like really the ones who transmitted the alphabet. Also, other views who said that were not the Phoenicians but the Syrians. Well, then we also have to wonder who they meant by the Syrians. But it's actually not. I mean, if you look also at the Greek traditions about the introduction of the writing, it's not really as clear cut as we sometimes think. I mean, I think we're very much colored by the account, the narrative of Herodotus.